ESPN projects Utah to win the Big 12 in 2025 because, well, it went so well last time. Why not double down? Drake Tollock on Big 12 here joining me to discuss. And Drake, look, I'm not always a fan of ESPN's projections or metrics. Sometimes I look at what they're doing and say, this is patently crazy, absurd. They're not making any sort of sense. Look how often they're wrong. I got to say, I don't think they're nuts on this one. I really don't, because I am that guy. I am that guy who's, maybe it's because this jacket I'm wearing has got Utah at the end of it in the SUU. Southern Utah is different than Utah, but in the same state. But I'm that guy who sits here and says, if they'd had a quarterback, yeah, they probably get to the Big 12 championship game.
Isn't there another school in Utah that's in the Big 12 that is supposed to be a little bit better than the Utes next season? I want to start. You ask. I want to start there. I do believe that BYU, and so does ESPN, while they have Utah in their college football championship, in their college football playoff championship, they have BYU as the number 9 team in the preseason of their way too early rankings out of their top 25. So can we figure out which one it is? Do we really like the Utes? Do we really like the Cougars? Do we really like both? And if I am an Arizona State, speaking on behalf of Big 12 fan bases, or Kansas State, or Iowa State, or Baylor, or Texas Tech, who was great in the transfer portal, even at TCU, I'm saying, hey, whoa, well, why not me ahead of Utah? Think about me first. Come on, guys, I'm on the upward trajectory. And that's where I can't completely wrap my head around this is trajectory. Utah should be a top 10 Big 12 team next year. Utah is still one of the most formidable programs in this conference. They came in as the big dog, and they won 2 Pac-12 championships in the last 3 years in that conference. They move in here, they go 5-7, they lose to Houston, they lose to Arizona State. They have a dud of a football season. That Oklahoma State win, now it's for naught. That same team finished 3-9. I believe Utah is formidable, but to have them in the playoff, from 5-7 to the playoff, that's where, Spencer, I mentioned this earlier this week on my show, is the 4 letters of ESPN. You don't need clickbait. You don't need in your projections to have Michigan, Ohio State playing in the first round, which they do, by the way. You don't need 2 SEC teams squaring off in the first round and the winner plays an SEC team, because we know that's not how the playoff's going to go. They're just putting this stuff out, which is a crazy thing for literal ESPN to do, to grab attention. I for the first time, I'm looking at these going, there's so little sense in this. It seems intentional. They throw a Utah out there just to make somebody mad and give everybody a major talking point.
But are they singling out the Big 12 with their ridiculous, eye-popping, and unrealistic projection here? Because their other conference champs were Georgia, wildly possible. Yep. Penn State, again, wildly possible. I argued on this very show yesterday, the idea of Penn State going to Columbus and beating Ohio State is not out of the realm of possibility. Plus, that doesn't even necessarily mean Penn State can't win the Big Ten championship if they don't beat Ohio State, as we saw this year when they had an opportunity to do so. And their other conference champion is Louisville, and you might think that's kind of crazy, but then again, Louisville brings in Miller Moss at quarterback. I think Jeff Brom is a really good coach. They have been solid in the transfer portal. They were a good team last year. They just weren't great. And Clemson has, I think, step back potential, leap forward. I don't really know on Clemson, but Miami's got a brutal schedule. SMU, how much do we trust them? I don't know. What do you think there's another conference championship projection in this ESPN 12-team playoff bracket that they've created here with their metrics that is as much of a troll job as Utah?
I don't think so. I would agree with you there. And there are a couple of different brackets that ESPN's leaning on. One of them is Bill Connolly's, which seems a little more reasonable. Connolly has Ohio State, BYU, Clemson, and Texas all getting buys. I don't think we disagree with those. He also has LSU, Oregon in the playoff, Boise State, Penn State, Iowa State, Notre Dame, South Carolina, Georgia. That all sounds fairly reasonable. I can't pick one of those and go, no, odd man out. Where the one they're actually touting, the big one that ESPN's you know what? Push it, is the one that has North Carolina. That's where you get, it's less the conference champions. It's more the additional things they've added into it just to make it spicy. North Carolina included, Michigan, Ohio State in round 1 included, and then Utah winning the Big 12. So if I'm a Big 12 school, a Big 12 fan base, number one, I'm dude, So that's really stupid. Why would you put Utah ahead of us? We were a lot better last year and have an upward trajectory. But number 2, I would take this with a grain of salt. And then if I'm a Utah fan, I would believe. I would buy in. Kyle Whittingham, 2 Pac-12 championships those last 3 years, as I already mentioned. And the defense held teams to 20.7 points per game last year. And with a good chunk of personnel on the defense coming back, Whittingham's team can contend. Jason Beck, Devin Dampier. There's still a chance that Utah, last year's preseason champion, could come back and win it all. Athlon has them at number 9, and they're way too early Big 12 power rankings. That's much. 9? No, 9's fine. 9's fine.
9 is not fine. By the way, earlier you said they can be one of the 10 best teams in the Big 12. Like, that's an accomplishment. That's like saying, well, they're an NBA playoff team if you count the play-in tournament. Like, yeah, that's 2/3 of the league.
Sure, the Big 12 was that deep. Where the 10 is a bowl game, you're going to go to a bowl game. We talked about it last year. There were 8 schools that could have won a Big 12 championship. There were 8 schools on the last weekend that had like a mathematic possibility to go and win a Big 12 championship. But think about Arizona State. They're better than Utah. I'm putting my life savings on this. Kansas State, better than Utah. BYU, better than Utah. Iowa State, Texas Tech, Baylor, TCU. Here's where it gets a little foggier around like the TCU-Kansas range. I still have those teams better than Utah. Utah at 9 makes a lot of sense to me.
It feels a little low. If Dampier is healthy, I'm just saying. If Dampier is healthy,
if KJ Jefferson's healthy, we keep saying this that what this guy can make. If DeQuan
what do you mean keep saying this?
Healthy,
we had a 1-year experiment.
We keep having but DeQuan Finn or KJ Jefferson, we see these guys who are either banged up or they're really good at a lower level. They're going to do it. They're going to be the catalyst for change, and they walk in and they're just not as good as we want them to be. Cam Ward though, like there are guys who prove it differently.
That's who was in my head.
Though we see it, I think more often than not, we just kind of bury it where a DeQuan Finn gets a multi-million-dollar NIL deal at Baylor and then within 3 games is no longer the starter there and is now back at Miami of Ohio in the MAC. I think it's much more likely that happens to Dampier than he becomes a Heisman contender. Sorry.
Okay. So as you look at the Big 12 power rankings going into next year, but I'm not saying I agree. I'm just saying okay. And we're going on to my next question here. If not Utah as your preseason Big 12 favorite, the odds would say it's Arizona State or Kansas State. I don't hate either of those picks. Arizona State has a lot coming back that's not just limited to Sam Leavitt and Jordan Tyson. They have done really well in the transfer portal to bring in guys that I think are going to help them out. They clearly have a really good coaching staff. I like the Arizona State pick. I really do. And it's crazy to say after such a 1-year turnaround from 3 wins to 11 and nearly the Final Four of the college football playoff and playing Ohio State, and they're 1 play away from beating Texas. But I mean, should that be your Big 12 favorite, or would you look at Kansas State with Avery Johnson going into another year?
I really do favor these 4 teams.
Texas Tech. Sorry. Coughed.
I really do favor the BYU, Kansas State, Iowa State, Arizona State conversation as kind of that top tier of what the Big 12 brings to the table next season. But one school we're forgetting here in a lot of these convos, Texas Tech. Year 4 of Chris Kleiman. Kansas State wins a Big 12 championship, beats TCU. Year 4 of Joey McGuire. People are asking questions, and the recruiting's been really good. When do we actually prove it? Can we be a Big 12 power? I think year 4, this could be the year of the Red Raider. Now, here's the problem, Spencer. When you and I agree on things, the top of the Big 12, manure hits the fan. But I do believe in the Texas Tech Red Raiders, who I have in that 5 spot right now, but they could very, very much win the
conference. Yes, I'm a buyer on the Red Raiders going into next year, which is horrible news for those in Lubbock. Maybe I'm only a buyer because I played their home golf course one time and I loved it. I thought it was a great track. Wood, 10 out of 10, 5 stars recommend. Right, maybe 9 out of 10. You got to say 10 out of 10.
ESPN just sent a push notification from a year in the future. Joey McGuire fired after a 2-10 season.
Oh no! Headline on Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin. Texas Tech, the Florida State of 2025. Oh, no. Get ready for
Kansas, the Kansas Utah.
So sorry, Texas Tech, but we both kind of like you right now. That's not.
Which, for those that are very confused, we each picked Kansas and Utah in the Big 12 championship.
Yes, we should offer that point of clarity. But hey, it was us and Joel Klatt, so we're.
And he makes a lot of money.
Best. Yeah, that's obviously all that matters, at least to some entities in the college world. Not me. That's not how I roll, folks. Not how I roll.